Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. This is Andrew Fingerman. I'm the CEO of PhotoShelter. We are fortunate today to have Jasmine DeFoore with us. Jasmine is fresh off a very hectic month because she produced the Texas Photo Roundup. For those of you not familiar with the Texas Photo Roundup, it's an annual event that takes place in Austin, Texas, where hundreds of photographers and people who love photography converge on the town and they soak up uh, oodles and oodles of business guidance and photo inspiration at the same time, plus a little bit of barbecue photo tour that I jealously watched via Instagram while my PhotoShelter colleagues were there enjoying themselves. So Jasmine is a photo consultant with expertise in both photo editing and photographer marketing, and she has graciously given us her time today um, to talk about creating a killer portfolio, and she's also a member of the dream team of photo business advisors that we have pulled together for our inaugural Jumpstart contest. For those of you that don't know about Jumpstart, it is a contest for PhotoShelter members only. You can find information about it at photoshelter.com/jumpstart. But what we've done there is we've assembled about $15,000 worth of prizes to help a handful of lucky PhotoShelter members kick off their business right for 2013. And there's just a few days left to enter. It actually entries expire at the end of February, and we'll be choosing a winner in March who will be showered with a dream team of advisors, some gear from Canon and Calumet. I think it's about $2,000 worth of gift certificates from Calumet and a Canon 6D, which I know a lot of people would enjoy. So we're very, very appreciative of Jasmine, not only for joining us today, but for also dedicating her time to the winner of our Jumpstart contest. And if you haven't yet entered, I would suggest you do so at photoshelter.com/jumpstart. Some incredible prizes there. So what I'd like to do is tee up today's presentation by introducing Jasmine and letting you know that you should expect probably a full hour of tips and insights from Jasmine. We'll be looking at some case studies as well as some direct guidance from Jasmine if you're thinking about rearranging, putting together, or reassembling your own portfolio. So Jasmine, hello. If you've
Hi.
lasted that whole introduction of mine, I'm glad you're still with us. Um, Jasmine and I met probably about 4 or 5 years ago already when you were working at Redux.
Yeah, that's right.
Maybe what you could do is, if hopefully you and everyone else can see my screen. If you could just give us a little bit of background about you before we kick off the presentation, that would be great.
Sure. I studied photojournalism. That was my first real foray into photography at the University of Texas in the early 90s. And after that, I moved to San Francisco, where I worked as a photo editor at the San Francisco Chronicle's website, sfgate.com. And then I made the move to New York, and I started freelancing at magazines, getting little photo editing jobs here and there. And then I went to Corbis, worked in the news team. And then I spent 8 wonderful years at Redux Pictures. Marcel Saba brought me on as his first rep, and I stayed there for a long time until it was ready to relocate my family back to Texas. So I came back to Texas about almost 4 years ago now, and that's when I went freelance and started doing freelance photo editing and marketing for photographers.
Great. And you've been doing the Texas Photo Roundup now for 2 years?
Yeah, it's 2 years old. The first time we did it, it was just a one-day event. We had one panel discussion, and then we had 4 hours of portfolio reviews. And people loved it, and they wanted more. And so, what could we do? We couldn't say no. So we this year we did 3 days of events. We had two workshops. Chris Buck came down and taught an amazing workshop. We had Dan Winters speak. Our evening keynote presentation was by him. And it was just like just this really special 3 days of photography and creativity. It was awesome.
Wonderful. So tell me, before we start launching into your tips right away, tell me a little bit about the clients that you typically work with. What stage in their career are they at, or do they have a particular specialty?
Sure. The stage in their career kind of varies. I mean, I have had some people who were, they've been trying to kind of be full-time photographers for a little while, but they still had day jobs and they were making that transition. But I'd say that most of my clients are pretty established. They've been at this full-time for a few years, maybe, 5 years or more. Um, and they're either coming to me because they are overwhelmed and maybe just too busy to handle all the aspects of their marketing, so they need outside help to take care of things, or they need to kind of shake things up because maybe they're in a little bit of a rut and they feel like a new edit and just a new set of eyes would kind of help them break out of that. So so it kind of ranges. I even have some people who are coming back to photography after years and years of being away from it. They're like, I want to give this another try. And so we try to sort of reinvigorate a career that they had put to rest at an earlier point in their life.
Got it. Okay, great. So let's not hold back and let's start jumping into your step one tips.
Okay.
And you have the number one thing that you want to start with is defining your target audience, and you say define your niche. So immediately, my first question is how does a photographer go about defining their niche?
That I think that is, I put it first, and it's probably the hardest thing to do. I mean, of all the things that one has to get done in order to put together a really effective presentation, I think figuring out who you are and who you want to shoot for is the most challenging thing to do. Um, I think that a lot of it is it's a little bit of phototherapy. You have to kind of reflect inward and think about the kinds of jobs that you want to be doing, the kinds of pictures that you want to be making. You need to look back at your work and think about which ones really spoke to you, what jobs were important to you, what personal projects really got you excited and got you, to get up off the computer and go outside and make a new body of work, and then try to think about, okay, well, who are the clients that use that kind of work? And then from there, you can hopefully start to kind of narrow down your focus a little bit. Of course, like people in certain regional markets, they do, it's just a fact of life. Like you do sometimes need to be able to do a few different kinds of things. You might need to be able to do interiors and food, and portraits. But for a really effective portfolio, I feel, especially a print portfolio, um, it needs to have some sort of focus. And we're going to go through a case study later where someone does a few different things, but there was a consistency throughout the different genres that kind of tied it all together. Like her lighting was consistent and the styling was consistent. So sometimes you can bring a few different kinds of work together into one collection on one website or in one print book, because you have, a really consistent point of view. And but it's hard. I won't sugarcoat it. It's
Right.
hard. I mean, a lot of it is just what do you want to be doing, and then which pictures do you have support what you want to be doing.
Yeah, I think if you're thinking like a marketer, right, and thinking about the audience, you want that first photo to immediately resonate with the potential client, right? And if it doesn't, they're busy and they're very likely to move on to something else.
Right. It's so hard. I mean, if you look at the stats, people are staying on websites for 30 seconds, 40 seconds before they decide to leave. So, what kind of decision can they have made about your work when they only stayed on for a few seconds? It's hard. And so that's why it's even more important to just, you have to have a sense of what you really want to be doing. And, if you can kind of think ahead to 2 years later, 3 years later, 5 years later, where do you want to be? Think about other people's careers who, with their work, they might be at a place that you'd like to see your work get to. Think about what they're doing, who are their clients. It may not match up perfectly for you, but it could give you some inspiration and help you think about how you might be able to package your work to appeal to those kinds of companies that you really want hiring you.
So how important is it to as you're thinking of like it's kind of like almost like retrofitting this stuff. Like I would like to shoot for, you know, Food and Wine magazine and Travel and Leisure magazine. Um, how important is it to kind of like retrofit your portfolio to that audience versus, or I guess it's how important or how dangerous is it if you're then kind of saying like this is stuff that needs to be in my portfolio if I want to go after that audience. Do you find
Well,
yourself saying you don't have enough of a certain thing to go after a travel and leisure?
yeah, no, I definitely find myself saying that. I mean, a big part of what I do with people is figuring out what's missing from the portfolio because people often have goals. They have a list of magazines, like you said, okay, they want to work for Bon Appetit, they want to work for Travel and Leisure. Well, you know, I go through all the work and I start narrowing it down, and what the strongest images may not be enough. We might need to say, okay, we might need to make a list. You need a detail shot of someone eating, in a beautiful, outdoor farmer's market. You need a portrait. You need more landscapes, and kind of create like a bulleted list of what's missing. Now, the danger in that is, I'm not saying, I don't want it to be misinterpreted that I'm saying that you should ditch what you do and shoot what you think the client wants. What I'm trying to hopefully get across is that you need to be true to yourself. And if what you really want to be doing, if you really want to be in travel and leisure and you're missing some of those pictures, then they need to be pictures that you would want to make. Like, don't just go and try to check off all the check boxes of things that they run. But make sure that it's true to what you want to do. It fits your style, it fits the way that you like to shoot, it works with your other images. In that case, yes, I think it's great to go back and shoot specifically so you can start getting into those kinds of magazines.
Got it. So your third bullet is the importance of getting a second pair of eyeballs on your work, and I assume that's not mom.
Hey, some moms, it depends on the mom, but
Right.
um, I think it's really important that people co collaborate and share feedback with each other. And, it doesn't need to be a paid photo editor, it doesn't have to be a consultant. It needs to be somebody who just can look at your work with a fresh perspective, someone who hasn't spent a lot of time with it because, heaven knows photographers spend a lot of time with their images. They get hung up on certain pictures that they need to let go of. They just, you could just be sick of it. I mean, you might love it might be great work, but you're just kind of over it. You've been looking at it forever and you don't want to anymore. And that's where, like, getting another photographer whose opinion you trust, um, even a graphic designer, an art director, anybody in the creative industry who you could ask for a second opinion, it is so helpful because they'll see things in your work that you didn't see, and they'll point out pictures that are just like not doing it for them. And it may have been the first time you ever heard that feedback about that picture. So it gives you stuff to think about that you just can't get on your own when you're working in a vacuum.
So friend versus consultant. When is it a good time to sort of pony up some cash and say, I'm going to hire a professional to help me with this edit?
I think when you get stuck, I think a lot of people, they might reach out to colleagues and to friends, and they collaborate with others, but then they still get to a point where they're kind of like, okay, now what? And a big thing that I hear from people I work with a lot is that they are doing pretty well with editorial, but they want to transition into getting more commercial work, and that transition is kind of daunting for people. I don't know. At that point, I think it does really help to get someone who has experience in the commercial industry and can just bring like that real world, like, the harsh reality of it. They
Mhm.
can lay it on the line for you in a way. Like, I think when you really start needing like industry insider knowledge, like that's a good time to bring in somebody. Or when you've just kind of hit a plateau and you feel like it's not going anywhere, then that's a great time to bring in somebody.
And are there some general rules of the game when, like, let's say for that editorial photographer who's trying to break into commercial, where like the sort of nuts and bolts of assembling a portfolio is it that different, or does it always just depend on the audience?
I don't think it's inherently that different. I mean, I think that the edit needs to be different, most likely.
Mhm.
And and you need to pay careful attention to who's going to be seeing the book. I mean, within each agency that you might go to, certain art buyers are working on certain accounts. And if you're kind of, if there's a company that has like a pharmaceutical account and they're doing a lot of really natural lifestyle or natural portraits for that account, and you do that, but you also do some other stuff, I mean, that would be the time to really tailor the presentation for the account that the agency actually is working on. But as far as the actual nuts and bolts of it, I mean, it's very similar to putting together an editorial portfolio. It's all about, creating a story, thinking about what you're trying to say about your business and who you are, and making each picture relevant and have it speak to the person who's looking at it.
Thank you. Okay, and the fourth point I think is pretty clear in terms of when you know that certain specialties won't blend together in a specific book, you should retain the option to make multiple books.
Yeah, and we talked. I mean, we had thought about talking about different brand identities. I mean, I think that for some people, it's just as simple as making separate books, and keeping the same umbrella brand identity and logo and everything. For other people, you're going to want to split it off. You might have your wedding company, and that's one entirely different brand, different URL, different marketing, and then you would have your, corporate photojournalism could be something else. So, but for most people who are, if it's all under the commercial umbrella, then I think you could keep the same brand identity, but just divide it up into different books.
Okay, great. So I'm going to move us along to step two,
Okay.
which is the edit.
Yes.
Okay, so take
So
us through.
yeah, so I mean, this is just sort of my workflow. Everybody has different ways of working. I'm pretty old school because I've been in the photo editing business for like 20 years. So I use Photo Mechanic, which is probably what I learned on it. So that's what I love. And they just updated it again and they made it even better. So I'm a total loyalist to Photo Mechanic. But so what I do is, I mean, the first step, of course, is to gather the pictures. I mean, and this really is one of the hardest things for photographers to do because like when I work with somebody to do a new portfolio, I ask them to gather up a folder of images for me. And I people always ask, well, how many pictures do you want to see? And I'll say, well, no more than 1,000. Like I try to put a cap on it because I have had people in the past send me like, 8,000 pictures. And so of course you have to go through this preliminary process of scaling it down. For some people, like all they can send me is 100. They're very tight editors already and they know what they think is good and so they're not going to send a lot. But just going through all your work and seeing everything that you've done over the years and thinking, asking yourself the question as you go picture by picture, would someone respond to this? Is kind of it's hard work. It's a lot of work to do. But that's the first step. So gather up all the pictures, get them all into one place. I generally don't keep pictures separated out by folders or projects. Like I mean, it depends, of course, on the person, but I like to just put it all into one folder and then start going through it because then I can see everything as one big grid and I don't know, I just start seeing patterns emerging. I like mixing up travel with portraiture. I just like to mix it up. So I'll kind of put everything into one place. I start then grouping the images. I'm still, in my editing program, so, Lightroom or Photo Mechanic, whatever you use. I group my pictures together to start telling little mini stories. Maybe not like literal stories, but little narratives, like just little mini, like 3 to 5 image mini narratives. Um, and then once I kind of have like a flow going, then I have to go back and I start taking out the stuff that just isn't working. For whatever reason, it just doesn't fit. It's not a strong enough image. Maybe like the lighting is so different from what you usually do that it sticks out. Um, the subject matter could be really different. Maybe most of what you have is, kids' lifestyle stuff, but then there's a few random pictures that aren't that. Like, you just have to start taking things out. And then that last bullet point is just sort of getting back to what we were talking about in the beginning, reassess, look at that collection of images in your folder once you've edited it down and ask yourself, okay, is this in line with what I'm trying to do? Does this fit the version of myself that I'm hoping to put out there?
So this kind of begs an interesting question. When anytime I've ever presented my own work, a job interview, gotten in front of a group and given a presentation, I've found that like the presentation itself gets better every time I give it and practice it. How important is it for the photographer to really kind of like solidify the bullet points, the talking points for each photo? Like what is the narrative that the verbal narrative that you're going to be telling that kind
Hmm.
of rides along with the portfolio presentation? Assuming you're present at the time.
Yeah. I mean, I definitely try to have, I was a rep for a long time, and so I went on a lot of portfolio showings and meetings. And, it's funny, like you can, I mean, each one is so different. Like you can just tell, like, if the person like woke up and, is having a bad day, they haven't had their coffee yet, or whatever. Like this, you get like a vibe when you're in the room and you're with the people. Um, and sometimes that vibe is very, like, you can tell that they just want to look, and they might ask you a few questions, and you can, it's always good to have a few little stories that you can tell about certain pictures. If you have like something crazy that happened on set, or something with like the logistics of the shoot, or, whatever, or if it was an interesting destination, it's nice to have a few little things in your pocket to talk about because, some people will ask a lot of questions about pictures. Other people, they just kind of want to look, and sometimes you can just tell when you're there that the feeling is that they just want to flip through it and they want to absorb it, and they don't necessarily need to talk about it. But I always come prepared with something to say just in case.
Right. I like being prepared too. I kind of over prepare for things like this. um, okay, great. I'm going to keep us moving ahead.
Okay.
We have our first case study. So Dennis Burnett.
Yeah. So Dennis recently relocated to Austin, Texas, from Savannah, and he does a mix of architecture, portraiture, editorial, lifestyle, but then he also has a really interesting, a few different bodies of work that are much more personal work. Like they don't really fit into his editorial or commercial work. And we'll see them in a second here. But so the challenge with him was, well, how do we show all these different things? For him, it made sense to still show those different aspects of what he does. The challenge was figuring out how to mix it together so that it made sense. And so what we ended up doing is we printed a hardcover book um, for the commercial and editorial work. No, I'm sorry, a hardcover book for the personal projects. And then the commercial and editorial work he's showing on the iPad. And then if you can go on to the next slide,
Sure.
you'll see, I think we have a couple pictures in here. So this is sort of the beginning, like the beginning editing process with his commercial and editorial work. And this is just, once I've narrowed down, he sent me, a couple hundred pictures. We narrowed it down, start kind of sequencing things.
Yeah, just
So you
looking
can
at
go
the
on to the
thumbnails,
next
there's a
one.
pretty huge diversity in terms
Yeah,
of
there's
the headshots.
right, and
Sorry, go
there's
ahead.
food. Yeah, there's food, there's architecture, there's landscapes, there's portraits, there's details, there's stuff on farms. So, it does sort of cover a lot of different things, but he's got a very consistent lighting style, which looks very natural. And we were able to weave things together, especially through doing a lot of diptychs. I mean, I'm a big fan of pairing pictures to create interesting narratives. So we relied a lot on that. So you can go on to the next one. So that was showing the kind of the edit. And then once I get the edit sort of sequenced in when in my editing software, then I move on to actually like laying out the book. And for me, I love to use Blurb's Booksmart software. Um, it's free and it's awesome, and I feel like because it's made for making books, it really, obviously just lends itself to making portfolios really easily. And so in Blurb, you can view spreads, 2 pages facing together. You can view all the pages at once. And so go ahead, and I think if you switch to the next slide,
Sure.
let me see if oh, okay, I'm sorry. So that slide didn't make it in here, but what you can go back one. Sorry.
Sure. No problem.
So What I do is, and this happens all the time with me, is like I'll get to a place where I feel like it's pretty good. The edit is making sense overall, but it's just like not quite there. And at this point, I switch out of full page mode, and well, sometimes I just leave the room, like just get away from it for a while. Like, I think if you look at it too much, it doesn't get any better. So come back to it and switch out of the full image version and then switch to the grid of where you can see all the pages at once. And it's at that point when you're looking at all these double page spreads as one, on one screen, it's there where I sometimes see what the problem is. That there's too many of one color. There's too many babies. There's too many landscapes that are similar. And that's where you can go back and start taking out things and moving things around again.
Got it. Okay, that's pretty clear. So should we jump into his book itself?
Yeah, so let's take a look at his book. So this is the this is the personal projects work, and this is so we put three or four, I think four personal projects into one book. He actually had this book printed, and this is something we'll kind of go over. Is like there's so many different options for making a book, and this book was printed by Blurb. They have a new Pro line product out that has like a sort of higher end paper choices, cloth covers, and so this is the uncoated paper. And I think it came out really beautifully. The reproduction is really nice. It's definitely, I think, for professional photographers, a step up from what they were offering before. So you can go on to the next one.
Sure.
So this is just showing, this is, I think, the last spread of the book.
Okay, so what were, I guess you said there were probably two other personal projects in here. Was the object to show a little bit of a diversity across the projects versus his commercial and editorial stuff?
Yeah, well, the thing that his personal projects are so, his aesthetic and his eye are just like so tuned in that all these different personal projects they totally made sense in one book. So he had one about the races, the Daytona races. He had one about opening day at a baseball field. He had one about people like just killing time at the airport. And they were all shot in this kind of funny, slice of Americana way. And so they all worked together really well, and the colors all worked together really well. They all had a lot of like really saturated reds and blues, and so it was really just a great way to show, because I think, especially editorially, but even commercially too, buyers really want to get a sense of who you are. I mean, there's so many great photographers out there. There's no end to the list of great photographers. So how do you stand out? How do you get someone to remember you? And I'm hearing more and more that it is this more personal work that gives the art buyer or the photo editor something to really remember. Because the commercial work, as long as, of course, you need to show that you can do that, but, we have to admit, like, there's probably other people who have just as many beautiful still life photos, or they shoot interiors just as well, or so it comes down to sort of differentiating yourself from the crowd, and I think the personal work really does that well.
Yeah, I agree. It's the passion projects really kind of show off who you are and help a potential client think, okay, that's somebody I'd either like to work with or like to be in a foxhole with for a couple extra days.
Right, and especially editorially, because so many editorial assignments, the photo editors are giving the assignments to people who they think will actually genuinely appreciate and enjoy the story. So,
Mhm.
if they know that you previously have done a lot of work documenting car races, then next time a car race story comes up, you're going to be in the mix if they know about you.
Excellent. Okay, and then you also have given us, I'm moving to the next slide,
Mhm.
the I believe this is the leave behind.
Yes, so this was printed by MagCloud, who they do on-demand magazine booklet printing. And so this mimics the edit of what he was showing on the iPad. So when he goes on meetings, he actually was at the Texas Photo Roundup. He did a bunch of meetings with people there, portfolio reviews. He would show his editorial work on the iPad, and then he would give them this as a leave behind, which is, and it's not exactly the same, but it's kind of similar. It has some of the same pictures in it. So it's just a very memorable leave behind. You can, if you go through the next couple slides, you'll see a few of the interior spreads.
Sure. So I'm paging through right now. Okay, and so that brings us to the next case study, which is on Kimberly Davis.
Yeah, so Kimberly is one of those people, like a lot of people, who does, she does food, she does people, she does interiors, details, still lifes. She shoots retail interiors, residential. And so, how do you put that all together and make it make sense? I mean, we talked about maybe splitting her things off and making separate books, but one thing that she does really well is that she has a very consistent look to her work. Her lighting is very consistent, and the sort of the styling, the kinds of interiors that she's shooting, everything's very pretty and modern and fresh. And so we were able to use those sort of aesthetic keywords to be the thing that brings it all together into one book. Um, and so with Kimberly, you know, her brand, and we'll see it on the next slide, but she has a really beautiful logo. Her brand really reflects the fact that she photographs beautiful things. I mean, that's what she does, and her brand reflects that. And the book itself, the actual physical book, um, is also it's very beautiful. It's, beautifully made. It's a custom book that she had made here in Austin by Cloverleaf Studio. They're custom book binders. If you go on to the next slide, I think you'll
Sure,
see.
I think I don't want to spoil it. Let's jump right in.
So,
So, would you like me to jump to the bound version or?
that's okay. We'll start with the
Okay,
edit just to kind of, we'll get there pretty quickly. So
sure.
here, this is a screen grab showing the blurb, um, all the pages in blurb, showing them, all at one time. So this is what I was talking about earlier, where, you know, I kind of step back and I look at this when I'm kind of not sure if something's working or not. And this is where I can start to see things. Because, when you look at it like this, you're like, oh, okay, I've got, two blue rooms right next to each other. Maybe I need to move that over. I feel for me it really helps. And it's just seeing it in double page spread format. It just really works for me. So this is the actual layout at Blurb. And then the next one is okay. So this is the slipcase and the book. These are the books that were made for her here in Austin. And she was really, I mean, she's very detail oriented. I mean, she put a lot of care and thought into every aspect of her book. The great thing about working with a local bookmaker is that you can go to their studio, you can feel the different fabrics that they have, you can talk about ink colors for the stamp, and so she was able to really collaborate with Cloverleaf on this and make something that I feel just like totally um, just reaffirms her whole business. I mean, it just puts like the finishing touch on everything.
This is gorgeous. So, my immediate question is, did she work with a designer for her logo and wordmark, or was that something that she came up with?
Yes, she did. She had the logo designed, and the colors, and so she had a palette, she had a logo, and she was able to bring that to Jace at Cloverleaf and say, okay, how can we make a book that, it incorporates this whole sort of feel. And I think they just did like such a great job choosing, just wonderful fabrics and colors and everything. And the book, I mean, I asked her for a little statement about, about the book and why she chose to go with a custom maker and all that stuff. And she said, I mean, one thing, and I've heard this from buyers who have looked at her portfolio, it has a definite wow factor. When she sits down and, you take it out of the case, you open it up, it's just the prints are so beautiful. They were done locally also, and they're gorgeous. And it just, it's the wow factor, which is another way of, sort of standing out in the crowd.
Now, um, I completely agree. My question is, did she make multiple copies that get sent around, or is this a kind of like a one-off kind of thing where she is taking it around with her to specific client meetings.
I'm pretty sure that she has a couple. I think she has one that she keeps with her, and then she has one that if it gets called in and she needs to send it, she can. I mean, these days you're not going to have like a shelf full of books and you're always sending them out. It's not like,
Right.
it was before, but when it matters, it really matters.
And are you at liberty to say what like the general ballpark cost was of putting this
I
together?
actually, I'm not sure about this book. So other books that I've done with other bookmakers, I think have been in the $300-ish range, maybe 400. Of course, it depends on how many different materials you're using and how many colors are being stamped on the book, and if you're stamping the slipcase and the book, all that stuff. But
Hmm.
I would say like 400 probably.
Okay,
Um,
that's great. I wanted to get a sense of what it costs to achieve wow factor.
yeah. And a lot of hard work. Great photography. I mean, of course, like that's all. We'll get to that in a little bit, but it is about the photography.
Okay, I'll keep us moving.
Okay.
Let's get to the photography. Okay, so
Yeah,
now
so
now
these
we're
are just
inside the book.
yeah, so these are a few interior spreads. Like I love this beautiful orange that they use as the end paper color. And the prints are just, absolutely beautiful. They're a gorgeous paper. I mean, you just want to like touch them, which of course is the last thing a photographer wants is for a bunch of people to be touching their prints. But it's a very tactile experience, and it just really pops.
The next one is dangerous because I'm hungry. Um,
Oh, yes. Yes. Kimberly's photographed a lot of amazing old Texas barbecue places, some of the best places. Hopefully I don't know if there's any listeners from like North Carolina or anything on here. They're going to get upset with me, but I think these are the best barbecue places in the country, in Central Texas. And so, yeah, I think it all works. And the next slide shows some of her interior work. Now, this is not the sequence that the actual book is in. We don't go straight from barbecue to beautiful linen couch. So there's like a little bit more of a transition. So you kind of move away from this very like, raw sort of food feel and you get into a little bit more of a polished food area. And then we move a little bit into still life and interiors, which gets us to here.
got it. But I can see what you said earlier about the theme of how she works with light, kind of resonating from
Mhm.
photo to photo.
Yeah, yeah, very consistent light, really pretty. And this is
Okay, and
an
then what's this
e-promo that
next?
she, yeah, this is an e-promo that she sent out after we updated the website and the print portfolio. And just really simple and clean, and it's all about the pictures and um, nothing fancy, but I think it's just very in line with the rest of her with her book and her other marketing.
Great. Um, I should mention before we leave the case study round and jump into some more of the direct tips that earlier in the presentation I didn't make note for everyone that if you do have questions, and you probably already know this if you've ever been on a PhotoShelter webinar, but you can use your GoToWebinar chat module, which is it should be in the bottom right-hand corner of your GoToWebinar little screen that comes up to submit questions. And Lauren from our team is taking questions and sending them my way, which I'm happy to then put in front of Jasmine as we move forward. And it looks like we have about 15 to 20 minutes left. So
Okay,
I'm going to keep us moving along back
sure.
to some of your tips. So now step three.
Okay, so this is really just kind of getting back now that we've looked at the case studies and seen some of the spreads. It was just kind of I wanted just to touch on a few more points about editing and how to decide like what pictures go together. And like I said earlier, it's about creating a narrative, and that narrative it could be a color story, it could be something about like patterns or shapes or colors that might be reappearing in a sequence of pictures and kind of ties them all together. Of course, subject matter can obviously be a narrative that ties a group of pictures together. I love to pair pictures, and I like to look for pairings that um, aren't necessarily like what you think would go together, but there's something about the two pictures when put together that creates a new sort of statement. So, you can obviously create a lot of humor that way by juxtaposing two pictures that are saying two different things, but together they kind of make a funny statement, or you can create tension in the edit by doing that. Um, and so it's, you have to play around with it. And that's why I like sort of just moving pictures around and seeing how those pairings are working, which, obviously works really well when you have two verticals, but also could work if you have square format pictures or even horizontals. I mean, it all depends on the format of the book that you decide to make. If you are going to be doing a lot of double page spreads, or if you're going to be pairing stuff, or even sometimes collage. Occasionally I'll do a grid of images on one side and then maybe like a full size picture on the facing page,
Hmm.
just to kind of mix it up. And I also like to mix up the amount of white space. Not always. I mean, it just depends on the work again. But for some work, it's nice to have like where sometimes you have a little bit of a border, and sometimes it's full bleed, and sometimes it might even be slightly smaller on the page with a big amount of white space around it. Because, it's nice to kind of give the viewer a little bit of a visual break. So look for opportunities to do that too.
Okay, great. And you say twice per year it's time to update the book.
I think it's good to put it on the calendar because it kind of can help you have that deadline looming. And if you haven't really shot anything book worthy in 3 months, and you've only got 3 months left until you have to update the book again, you're probably going to get out there and try to make some work, which, so, I mean, sometimes like I really feel for photographers these days. They wear so many hats, they have to do so many different things, constant marketing, all the things that you do. And, sometimes I don't know if shooting new work, especially, personal work, unpaid work, test shoots, like, it may not be something that's a top priority in a really busy week, but I think if you have this deadline on your calendar, it really will help to kind of, remind you of the importance of doing that. And also, we're going to talk about marketing a little bit here, but, updating the book is obviously a very um, uh, like concrete thing that you can then go out and tell potential clients. It's a great thing to be tweeting about. It's a great thing to post on your blog, on your website, to mention in an email. Um, but if you didn't do it, then you can't talk about it.
Um, okay, so and then the last bullet here is portfolio reviews.
Yeah, I mean, I think it depends on where you're at, maybe in your career, what your budget is. If Of course it depends on who the reviewers are, but there's so many great portfolio review events happening around the country now that if you find one that has a list of reviewers, potential clients, maybe reps, that you really feel it would be worth it, because trying to like set up a week or 2 weeks worth of meetings in another city, it can be daunting. It's a lot of email that just never gets replied to. It can be really frustrating. So in an ideal world, you could meet all those people on your own for free. I mean, I know some people are not so into the paid review thing, but I really feel like it's such an efficient way to see a lot of people in 1 or 2 days.
Are
So,
there are there any of the major events that you would recommend, like top two that you might suggest people check out?
yeah, the Palm Springs Photo Festival, A, because it's in Palm Springs, which is awesome, and B, because they always have a huge list of reviewers. They have so many people come, and they have people from, they have curators, they have reps, they have editorial, they've got ad agencies, record companies. Um, excuse me, 1 second for a drink of water.
No problem.
Yeah, so Palm Springs, I love. Of course, I'm partial to the Roundup, because it's my
Mhm.
baby. I think that, we had a really great list of people. Um, Photo Nola does portfolio
Mhm.
reviews, and then the Photo Plus, I mean, the Palm Springs people, they run the portfolio reviews at Photo Plus Expo. And so
In New York.
in New York, yeah.
We're not losing you there, are we?
Oh, I'm okay.
Okay, good. All right, I'm going to keep us moving on and to talk a little bit about digital versus print. I know this is a hot one.
Yeah, and you'll love my top bullet point, which is like basically there's no answer,
Right.
because I mean, I've been asking people I ask people all the time. Anytime I'm with an art buyer or photo editor or creative director, I always ask these questions. Do you want to see a print book? Do you like iPads? Do you want e-promos? Do you want print promos? And the consensus is that there is no consensus. Like, some people, I think the one thing is, I mean, I feel like generally speaking, people like print books because they don't get to see them as often. So there's a little bit of a novelty factor there, but they're okay with an iPad too. It's not like they're going to be bummed out by that.
Yeah, and then you can always go with the hybrid, of course, which is what you did with Dennis, which
hmm
is, you have a print book, you have an iPad presentation, and you have a Mag Cloud leave behind. So you're kind of
Yeah,
covering all the bases there.
yeah, and Dennis shoots a lot of really great video, so the iPad is a perfect way to integrate that too. You can have, you're swiping through, you've got a still, a still, a still, and then you've got a little motion vignette that actually is the person in it was in one of the still photos just before. So it's a really nice way to kind of integrate that into it and make, that's what the iPad's for, right? I mean, it's a great way to show different kinds of media. Um, but yeah, no rules on that one.
Right. Okay, and you've got a 40 image guideline.
Yeah, I mean, again, totally ballpark. I have seen some very successful books that had 100 pages in them. I've also seen amazing books that were 20 pictures, 25 pictures. I think that's a pretty tight edit. The problem with a really small edit is that obviously the person goes through it really quickly, and then you're kind of like, you may be like, okay, so I guess our meeting's done, you know?
Right.
Um, so anyway, it's having more pictures can help, but then you got to be really careful. It's very few people I think who can do a really, really big edit and get not have the viewer be a little bit bored by the end.
Got it. So keep it around 40 images, and you might want to have that passion project book stashed in
hmm
your bag as well.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I always come with something extra if the meeting's going really well and everybody's like liking each other and you have a good vibe from the meeting. Of course, like that's a great opportunity to say, I have this other book I'd love to show you.
Excellent. Okay, I'm going to jump to the next slide, which I think this is actually
Okay.
our last slide. Okay, so budget. That's always a
Yeah,
dirty word.
for marketing. I mean, we could do, obviously marketing could take up a whole other couple of webinars, but with the marketing, I mean, one thing I feel like is that because everybody posts everything that they do now online, like you see all the cool promos that people are doing and people are blogging about them and they're being shared all over the place. One sort of like not so great side effect of that, I think, is that people sometimes feel like it's intimidating. Like you might think like you have to do some like totally amazing promo that's like this box full of stuff and you have to make 100 things and but that's just I don't you really don't, I think a good promo can be much more affordable. Um, but you still have to come up with a number. Like you have to know what are you willing to spend. And so if you can establish what that number is first and then kind of work backwards from that, so then you can decide, what's your mailing list? Like how many people do you want to give this to? How many extras do you want to hold on to for yourself? Don't forget about postage, the cost of the designer, envelopes, whatever, all those things, they add up. But and then you can decide, do you want to do something less expensive and send it to more people? Do you want to like make something really special but just send it to 25 people? Those are all things that once you have a number in mind that you can spend, you can figure out.
Yeah, and what I hear constantly from buyers and photo editors is you need to target the mailing or the distribution so that I really feel like the promotion is meant for me. If you're sending a sports photo editor your your bottle of wine still life collection, they're going to immediately wonder how did I get on your list and why are you trying to promote your work to me? So the
Yeah,
targeting really comes into play there.
it's so important. And I think with editorial, like I don't cut photographers a lot of slack for having bad editorial lists because you should be able to figure out if your work is right for most magazines. The problem in list building comes when you start thinking about the ad agencies
Yeah.
and graphic design firms, because one agency might have, 15 different accounts, and who knows which art buyer is working on what. I mean, you can't know that. And at that point, I mean, you could really like beat yourself up about it, and you definitely want to try to target it as well as you can, but I don't know. I mean, I know that, of course, everybody wants to receive something that feels like it was made for them, but you also have to deal with just the reality of not ever really being able to know what each individual art buyer is working on. And so I think the best you can do is to put together something that just really conveys who you are and what you're about. And, you know, you can follow up with them. And then if you find out that you're not really a good fit, or you can, send a follow-up email and see if it goes anywhere. But I think it's much harder to like really target those lists. I mean, of course you can weed out some people that are irrelevant, but at some point you're just gonna not really know.
Hmm. So I love your second major bullet here, which is update the rest of your brand experience, because you know that if they do like your work, they're going to be coming and kind of triangulating everything else, right?
Yeah, yeah, no, I mean, it's such a easy and thing to do, but it's a really common mistake because you're working so hard on the portfolio and you're working so hard on the marketing, and a lot of times people kind of jump the gun and they send stuff out, and then they haven't really thought about the whole experience for the buyer. So yeah, so definitely, this is pretty simple stuff. I mean, even if it's just like making sure that there's a blog post up that isn't 6 months old, just like make it
Mhm.
look like you've been on there and you've been active, and same with Facebook and whatever other social media outlets you like to use.
And in that promo, don't forget to leave off how to get to your website and how to get to you via phone and how to get to you via email.
Yeah, yes, very important. URL. I mean, you'd be surprised
Right.
sometimes the things we forget because you're overwhelmed and there's a lot of details. But yeah, definitely contact information, is for sure a must-have.
Okay. And then you have some specific email tips here.
Yes, I like to send personal emails to people that I really want to be working with. So, if when I was a rep, if I had a certain photographer wanted to shoot for, like you said, Travel and Leisure or Afar or National Geographic, um, if they weren't on that person's radar at all, it's sort of like a cold email. You're sending an email to a person, but they don't know you. They've got no idea who you are. They get a ton of these emails every day. So, I suggest just being like very short, to the point. Say something like, I love what you guys have been doing. I saw the blah, blah, blah story in last month's issue. It was so beautiful. I really feel like my work would be perfect for you guys. Um, Please keep me in mind. Like, that's it. Short, sweet, URL, maybe drop an image into it, not super big. And that's it. And then, repeat that every 4 months, or so. I mean, you just don't want to like be annoying. I think that's that's
Right.
the biggest key is just to make it feel personal. And when you do those personal individual emails to each and every person who's a top priority for you, that's where you start to see people actually replying and saying like, actually, I do have a project coming up that would be great. It's a really nice way to show people that you're making the effort to connect with them.
I love it. And then with the sort of more bulk oriented email newsletter to your mailing list, how often would you say is a fair kind of frequency for sending that?
I think that 4 times a year would be fine. I mean, I think it really, or some people get away with doing it monthly because they have a lot going on that they can talk about. I think it really depends on how often do you have newsworthy things to be sharing. And I think on the next slide we might have
Ah,
like a little
there's one more slide.
short
Perfect.
list.
Yes.
Um,
New,
yeah, so
news is a good thing to share.
yeah, because a lot of people just send a picture, and their contact information in email blast, and that's okay, I think. But I think you can step it up a little bit by including something about what's going on in your professional life, maybe your personal life. I mean, some people do email newsletters that have personal stuff in them, and it's really interesting. But just having something to say, I mean, that's, and also, and this is something I didn't include on the slide, but it's really, it's kind of obvious, but really important, is to have some sort of action item. Like, what do you want them to do with your promo? It's like, okay, they have it. Now what? Do you want them to go check out this new gallery of work? Do you want them to see this behind the scenes video that you made? Do you want them to are you going to be in town next week and you want to try to set up a meeting? Like, there needs to be some sort of thing that, a next step for the email, that it's not just like an electronic postcard.
Yep. In
um,
marketing, we call that a call to action.
Call to action, exactly. And it really does help. I mean, obviously, like, the click rates are going to be a lot higher if there's something there that has some substance to it, that people can interact with you in some way.
Great. So this is a good list of things that you can mention. I do think, having that piece of news to share, whether it's, monumental or just an update, it's yet another reason to get back on the client's radar screen or
Yeah,
prospect's
exactly.
radar screen.
Yeah.
Um,
And
so
you got to do it over and over. I mean, you just have to be consistent. These people are really busy, and, it might take a couple years for them to ever respond. But if you really are a good fit for them, then just keep reminding them on a regular but not too frequent basis. And, you just have to be consistent with it.
so we have covered a lot of the do's. I'm wondering, as we come up on the hour, if there are any major don'ts that you would like to call out for people.
I would never call a client. I would, after sending an email, like, especially if you can track, who opened it, like through My Emma or Constant Contact or Agency Access or one of those places, you can see who clicked on your emails. I would never
Right.
call somebody and be like, "Oh, so I saw that you clicked on my e-promo," because it's just really creepy, and I've heard stories of this happening. So I, I definitely would avoid that. Yeah. Can't think of anything else off the top of my head, but that's a big one.
Okay, that's totally fair. Your do's way far outweigh the don'ts. We appreciate that. So on our very last slide, I have a couple of contact details for Jasmine. If you follow Jasmine on Twitter, I can promise you a regular stream of good, up-to-date photo industry information. I follow her and I enjoy it. I
Thanks.
also am connected with you on Facebook, so I know more than I need to know about your kids, and you know more than you need to know about my kids. Um, so thank you, Jasmine. This has been valuable and powerful insight.
You're so welcome. It was really fun.
We will be posting the playback of our chat on the PhotoShelter blog later this week. And I'll put in one more plug for our Jumpstart competition. So get in now before the month is over, so we can count you in for this dream team of photo business advisors that includes Jasmine and a number of other great ones. So that's at photoshelter.com/jumpstart. And thank you, everyone. And thank you,
Thank
Jasmine.
you. Thank you.